The thing about flying is it feels ordinary until it doesn't. My name's Carol Jensen, senior flight attendant with Alaska Airlines, 10 years, 2 months, and 14 days. I remember that count because my daughter keeps asking when I'll quit and get a normal job. But there's nothing normal about 30,000 feet above the world where order is the only thing between calm skies and chaos. That morning, October 17th, began like every other. A paper cup of burnt coffee, a roll call in Gate 27, and a Boeing 737 waiting to inhale another Tuesday full of strangers. Flight 2127, Boston to Seattle. 5 hours, 15 minutes, the kind of long haul that felt like muscle memory. When I arrived at 9:15 a.m., boarding had already started. Passengers shuffled in with their headphones, carry-ons, and caffeine. I did my usual pre-flight ritual, the emergency kit check, seatbelts, oxygen masks, overhead bins, each click, and latch part of a silent prayer that no one ever hears. In the cockpit sat Captain James Wright, 48 years old, calm as a winter lake, 20 years with the airline, not one incident to his name. His voice carried that firm, collected tone that made passengers feel safe even when the sky didn't. "Morning, Carol," he said, eyes glued to his checklist. "Morning, Captain, we looking good?" Clear skies all the way to Seattle, smooth flight. Beside him was First Officer Joshua Newman, mid-30s, new but sharp, the kind of guy who smiled easily and learned faster than he spoke. "Should be an easy day," he said. I smiled back. Famous last words. By 9:45, 147 passengers were strapped in, pretty full for a Tuesday. I walked the aisle, helping a mother with a stroller, reminding a businessman to put his phone in airplane mode, smiling because that's what calm looks like even when you're tired. That's when I saw her. Seat 14, C. Window seat, small frame, maybe 10 or 11, ponytail, brown eyes too serious for her age, an unaccompanied minor tag dangled from her backpack like a badge. I crouched beside her. "Hi there, what's your name?" "Flora." "I'm Carol. I'll be taking care of you today. First time flying alone?" She shook her head. "No, I fly alone a lot. I was visiting my grandparents in Boston, going home to Seattle." "Well, if you need anything, you just press this button, okay? And I'll check on you every hour." "Yes, ma'am, thank you." Polite, calm, unusually composed. I made a mental note 14C, Flora Daniels, and moved on. At 9:58, we pushed back from the gate 2 minutes early. Captain Wright's voice came over the intercom, steady and reassuring. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Wright from the flight deck. We've been cleared for takeoff. Flight time today is approximately 5 hours and 15 minutes. Weather looks great all the way to Seattle. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you on the ground by 1:15 Pacific time." Engines roared. The world tilted. Boston fell away beneath a veil of clouds. Once the seatbelt sign blinked off, I joined my crew, Albert and Nena, in the forward galley. Albert, only 2 years in, but steady, the kind who could calm a nervous flyer just by existing. Nena, 6 years of experience, and an attitude sharp enough to cut turbulence in half. "Beverage service?" Albert asked. "Let's do it," I said. "Nena, you take aft. Albert, mid-cabin. I'll handle first class and check on our solo traveler in 14C. We rolled our carts down the aisles, the usual ballet of smiles, drinks, and gentle reminders. Everything smooth, everything predictable. 90 minutes into the flight, I carried 2 meal trays up to the cockpit routine protocol. Pilots eat different meals in case of contamination, but we'd run short of chicken. Both got pasta. "Here you go, gentlemen," I said. "Thanks, Carol," Captain Wright replied, rubbing his eyes. "Didn't sleep much last night." "Long morning?" "Yeah. I'll be fine once we're on the ground." I didn't think twice, closed the door, went back to the cabin. 30 minutes later, the intercom buzzed a clipped sound that made my stomach tighten. Captain Wright's voice came through, but it was off, strained. "Carol, cockpit, now." I froze. That tone wasn't standard. It wasn't procedure. I walked quickly to the front, heart pounding, knocked once. The door opened, and my breath caught. Captain Wright was pale gray, sweating, one hand clutching his stomach. "I don't feel well," he said, voice slurred. Beside him, First Officer Newman looked worse, ashen, unfocused. "What's happening?" "Nausea, cramps, dizziness. Wright winced. Think it was the food. The pasta? He nodded weakly. Food poisoning. Both of them. My training kicked in before panic could. I'm getting the medical kit and checking for a doctor. I sprinted down the aisle, grabbed the internal crew phone. Albert. Nena code red. Both pilots down. Medical emergency. I need a doctor and anyone with flying experience. Now. Static. Then Albert's voice, tight but controlled. Copy. Making the announcement. Over the PA, his words echoed through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's a medical professional on board, please press your call button immediately. 3 lights blinked overhead. Nena's voice came over the line. 2 passengers with medical background responding, sending them forward. One of them, a woman in her 50s, stepped briskly into the cockpit. Short gray hair, cool eyes. I'm Dr. Lauren Fitz. What's the emergency? Both pilots. Food poisoning. She paled. Both? Yes, please, help them. Inside the cockpit, the air was heavy. Sweat, fear, the metallic tang of oxygen. Dr. Fitz moved fast, checked pulses, vitals, eyes. Severe gastroenteritis, likely contaminated food. They'll lose consciousness soon. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. Can they fly? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They shouldn't even sit upright. The captain looked up at me, struggling to focus. I'm sorry, Carol, he whispered. I can't. Beside him, the first officer slumped forward, mumbling incoherently. Dr. Fitz looked at me with the calm of someone who's delivered bad news before. You need another pilot, immediately. For the first time in 10 years, I had no procedure, no checklist. Just 30,000 feet of sky, and the terrifying realization that nobody was flying the plane. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't belong on an airplane. Not the hush of earbuds, not the steady thrum of engines. A different quiet, the kind that forms when every trained response you have hits a wall. Find another pilot, Dr. Fitz said, already taping IV lines to the captain's forearm. The first officer's head lolled. She guided his chin up, voice low, steady. Stay with me, Josh. Eyes open. I stepped back into the forward galley and picked up the handset. My hands were dry and useless. I forced them to move. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the PA, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone braver. We have a medical situation in the cockpit. If anyone on board has pilot training, commercial or private, please press your call button immediately. I released the button and the cabin held its breath. 1 second. 3. 10. A chime. Row 19, aisle. A man in a trim charcoal suit with the posture of confidence waved me over. He looked mid-40s, clean shave, eyes that did math when he blinked. I'm Tom Richardson, he said. Private pilot. Cessna. VFR mostly. I can try. Try. The most expensive word I'd ever heard. Come with me. He followed me up, weaving through the muttering aisle, past faces caught between fear and hope. I opened the cockpit door, and confidence slipped out of him like oxygen from a pinhole. He stared at the wall of instruments, the FMS screens, MCP knobs, radios, annunciators, like a pianist sitting at a pipe organ that reached the ceiling. He took the left seat for a heartbeat, then stood again, palms hovering over the controls, as if heat radiated from them. This is a lot more than 6-pack gauges, he whispered. I've never flown a, he swallowed 737. Dr. Fitz didn't look up. Captain's non-responsive. First officer's losing coherence. Can you land us? I asked, and I hated how the sentence bent at the end, begging. Tom's honesty was the kind that doesn't try to be kind. I don't think so. I looked at the altimeter FL 350. The autopilot light glowed a steady, indifferent green. The jet hummed along a heading we'd chosen when the world still made sense. The headset crackled in its cradle, the radio murmuring ATC instructions, meant for other flights, other lives still obeying their plans. Behind me, a soft voice said, "Excuse me." I turned. She barely filled the doorway, the top of her ponytail at the height of the door handle. Flora. Sweetheart, I said, you need to go back to your seat. I can help. Flora, this isn't a game. I know it's not, she said, no tremble. That's why I'm here. Tom tried a smile that made no promises. Kiddo, I'm a pilot, and... What's that gauge? Flora asked, pointing. Tom followed her finger. He frowned. I don't know that one. EP, she said. Engine pressure ratio. Thrust reference. Those are your N1 fan speeds. That's the vertical speed indicator. That's the attitude indicator. Altitude hold is on. Heading 285. Indicated 420 knots. The cockpit shifted an inch toward her, as if metal could lean in. Tom exhaled. How do you know all that? My dad's Captain Rob Daniels, Alaska Airlines. He's taught me since I was 7. We practice on a 737 to 800 sim every weekend. I waited for the joke. It didn't arrive. I looked at Dr. Fitz. She didn't look back, but her silence was agreement. This was the only door left standing. Okay, I said, and felt the plane tip into a different story. Sit. Flora climbed into the captain's seat. Her sneakers barely kissed the pedals. She hauled the seat forward until her knees bent like a runner's in the blocks. Her small hands rested on the yoke, not with drama, but with a familiarity that reported for duty. First, she said, we call ATC. She slipped the headset over her ears, adjusted the mic, pressed the transmit switch with her thumb. Seattle Center, Alaska, 2127. We have an emergency. Both pilots are incapacitated. This is Flora Daniels. I'm 11 years old, requesting immediate assistance. For a beat, only the fans answered. Then, Alaska 2127, say again? Did you say 11? Yes, ma'am. I'm 11. My father is Captain Rob Daniels with Alaska Airlines. He trained me. I need help to land. A pause long enough to age us, then a new voice, soft steel, Alaska 2127, Seattle Center Controller Julia Gray. We copy your situation. We're with you, Flora. Start by telling me your altitude, airspeed, heading, and autopilot status. Flora's eyes flicked like wipers clean, precise. Altitude 3 to 5,000. Airspeed 420. Heading 285. Autopilot engaged. Excellent, Julia said. Don't touch anything yet. We're coordinating. Can you maintain current parameters? Yes, ma'am. I looked down the narrow tunnel of the forward galley and saw the cabin beyond faces craning, some standing. I stepped out, pulled the door to, and met the flood. What's happening? A man in 12D demanded. Is someone flying this? Yes, I said. Truth shaved close. We have a trained passenger in the cockpit and are in contact with ATC. Who? From 8C, voice sharp. I hesitated a second too long. The little girl from 14C? 10A said, voice climbing. The air ripped, crying, prayers tumbling in 2 languages. A man took 3 steps toward me like a wave. I raised my hand. Listen to me, I said, and it came from the part of me that knows how to drag order out of fire. She has been training on this exact aircraft with her father, a commercial captain, for years. She knows the instruments. She is talking to air traffic control right now. She needs silence. Nana materialized at my shoulder, voice like a keel. Seat belts on. Now. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Albert moved down the aisle with that calm that spreads by contact. Hands light on headrests, eyes steady as he shepherded fear back into seats. People sat. A few sobs shook themselves dry. I slipped back into the cockpit. Flora's voice was even. Fuel shows 8 to 400 pounds, roughly 90 minutes. Copy, Julia said. We're trying to reach your father, Flora. Maintain present course. We will vector you when ready. Flora glanced at me, and for the first time the surface of her voice rippled. I'm scared. So am I said, but I believe you. The radio crackled. A new timbre threaded in, a voice that filled the small space like a hand finding yours in the dark. Flora. Her breath caught. Daddy. I'm here, he said. Right here. You're okay. We're okay. I don't know if I can do this. You do know, fear is information, remember? It tells us what matters right now. Getting everyone home safe. That's it. You could hear him smile. Tell me what you see. She reported again, altitude, airspeed, heading, autopilot, fuel. He repeated each number back like vows. Good, he said. Here's the plan. We will start a controlled descent to 10,000 feet. We'll go slow. You will do exactly what you've practiced 100 times. Flora straightened. Ready. Before anything, he said, hands on the yoke, feel the weight. Her fingers tightened. The tiny tremor that had been hiding in them stilled. When you disengage the autopilot, the airplane will be yours. You'll feel it. It will feel heavy, but you're strong enough. Where is the AP disconnect? Red button on the yoke. Correct. Do not press yet. He paused. I could hear him breathing. Steady, measured. We're going to set a descent rate of minus 1,000 feet per minute. You'll use the vertical speed indicator. You will counter any day. Overcorrections with small inputs. Small inputs, okay? Small inputs, she repeated. Julia, he said into the background, confirm traffic and vectors. Runway 16R is being cleared, Julia answered. Emergency services rolling. You're over western Wyoming, Flora. We'll give you a gentle arc to Seattle. Expect vectors in 5. Copy, Rob said. Then, softer, I'm in the tower at SeaTac, baby. I'll have eyes on you soon. She blinked hard. Okay. I picked up the internal phone and called the cabin. Albert, Nena, we're stable at cruise. Keep everyone seated, belts on. Quiet is essential. Copy, Albert said. Understood, Nena added. Cabin is calm. Flora, Rob said, look at your trim. Verify neutral. Good. Now, when you're ready, we will press the red button. You and me together. After disconnect, ease the nose just enough to see minus 1,000 on the VSI. Not minus 2, not minus 1,500, just 1,000. If the nose drops too much, I pull back gently, she said. That's my girl. For a moment, no one breathed. The autopilot hum felt like a prayer wheel still turning. Outside, the sky was the blue of pretending nothing was wrong. Flora's thumb hovered above the red button. She looked at me over the headset, over a gulf I couldn't cross for her. I gave her what little things I had left, a nod, a truth. You've got this. She took a breath that belonged to someone older and pressed the AP disc. A chirp. The green light winked out. The airplane became a living thing under her hands. Hold your picture, Rob said, voice low, endless. Now ease it forward, tiny, tiny, watch the needle there, no. That's too much back a hair, beautiful minus 1,000. Lock it in. Hands steady, eyes moving. Breathe. The VSI settled like a bird to a wire. The altimeter began to unwind. The yoke stopped twitching in her hands and started listening. Flora exhaled. Minus 1,000. That's you, Rob said. That's all you. She smiled for the first time. Seattle Center to Alaska 2127, Julia said softly. You're descending through 3,000 to 4,000. On course. You're doing great. I felt the plane slide down its invisible staircase, each step a small victory measured in feet and faith. Behind us, the cabin held. In row 14, an empty window seat waited like a promise kept for later. Somewhere back there, a woman whispered a prayer into her hands, and someone else counted breaths, and someone else wrote a text they might never send. Up here, an 11-year-old kept her hand light and her courage heavy. 29,000, Julia called. Copy, Flora said. Her voice was a straighter line now, holding minus 1,000. Rob's voice wrapped around her like a seatbelt. Perfect. We're gonna ride this down to 10,000. We'll talk approach when we level. I'll be with you the whole way. Okay. The engines murmured, not caring about our drama. The sky ahead was just sky indifferent and endless, but the space inside the cockpit had changed. It felt smaller and larger all at once, squeezed by fear, expanded by resolve. Carol? Albert's voice in my ear. Cabin steady. Copy, I whispered. Flora checked her instruments, then the horizon line, then her instruments again. A rhythm, a litany. Her breathing matched the slow scroll of the altimeter. 10 minutes to 10,000, Rob said. You're flying the airplane, Flora. Say it. She didn't hesitate. I'm flying the airplane. Outside the door, 147 people sat very still. Inside, the girl in 14C made gravity obey. We kept descending 1,000 feet at a time toward the part of the story where the sky ends and the ground begins. Altitude, 29,000 feet. The engines hummed their mechanical lullaby as we cut through the Wyoming sky, steady as a heartbeat. Flora's small hands never left the controls. Her posture was perfect, back straight, eyes scanning the instruments like she'd been born in that seat. Her voice, though tiny, carried authority when she spoke to her father. Passing through 28,000, she said. Good. Rob replied from Seattle Tower. Keep your descent rate exactly where it is. Smooth and steady. I watched the numbers unwind on the altimeter. 28,000, 27,000, 26,500. Every digit felt like a lifetime. Behind me, the world existed in whispers. Passengers prayed. Some stared blankly ahead, faces wet and hands clenched. Others quietly cried into seatback napkins. Albert's voice came through the interphone, calm and clear. Cabin is secure, everyone seated. Nena's moving aft to assist passengers who are feeling faint. Good, I said, my eyes still on Flora. Keep it that way. Fear had weight in that cabin, but Flora was lighter than it. Talk to me, baby. Rob's voice filled the cockpit again, firm and steady. What's your airspeed? 350 knots. Perfect. Reduce throttle slightly. Keep her at 300. Copy. She eased the throttles back with both hands. The engines softened their growl to a whisper. That's it, Rob said. Remember what I taught you about speed. It's power and patience. Too much of one, and you lose the other. He chuckled faintly through the radio static. That's my girl. Julia, the air traffic controller, came back online. Alaska 2127. You're cleared direct to Seattle-Tacoma International. Emergency units are on standby. You're doing excellent, Flora. Thank you, ma'am, Flora said politely, like she was reciting a lesson in class, not flying a 90-ton aircraft. 20 minutes into the descent, the cabin pressure seemed to squeeze the fear out of people. Some passengers began singing quietly, a prayer, maybe. Others whispered words of encouragement. In row 14, where Flora should have been sitting, an older woman held the empty seatbelt with trembling fingers. She's just a child, she whispered. How can a child fly a plane? A young man beside her said softly, She already is. Albert passed through the aisle, reassuring each row. His composure was a rope everyone held onto. Nena followed with water bottles, murmuring, Stay calm, please. She's doing great. I envied their calm. Inside the cockpit, my pulse thundered like takeoff speed. Altitude, 15,000 feet, Flora reported. Copy, Rob answered. Almost there. When you hit 10,000, I want you to level off. That means gently pulling back on the yoke until the vertical speed indicator reads 0. Got it. For a moment, there was silence, just the hum of the engines and the faint buzz of the instruments. Then Flora spoke softly, without radio. Miss Carroll? Yes, sweetheart? Are they still alive, the pilots? I glanced back. Dr. Fitz was tending to both men. IV lines hung from the armrests. Their faces were pale, but the monitors she'd improvised from the med kit blinked with life. They're holding on, I said. Thanks to you. Flora nodded, jaw tight. Then I can't mess up. You won't. 10,000 feet, she said after a while. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. Perfect, Rob replied. Now ease back, just a touch. Watch your vertical speed. Flora pulled gently. The nose lifted, engines adjusting their tone. The vertical speed needle drifted toward 0. Hold it, there. Level flight. Outstanding job. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping a little. Now we'll prepare for approach, Rob continued. You've got maybe 20 minutes before touchdown. Julia's voice chimed in. Flora, Seattle approach is ready for you. You'll be landing on runway 16, our longest one we've got. You're 120 miles out. Roger, 16R, Flora replied. In the cabin, Albert relayed updates in gentle tones. We're making a safe, steady descent. Please remain seated and buckled. Our young pilot is in communication with air traffic control and her father. There were quiet gasps. Someone started clapping, just once, and others joined in timidly until the sound filled the fuselage soft, rhythmic, hopeful. For the first time since the crisis began, I saw something like faith move through that aircraft. I turned back toward Flora. She hadn't looked up from the instruments once, focused like glass. Rob's voice softened. Flora, you're doing everything right. Now, let's talk landing sequence. Her voice wavered. Dad, what if I don't get it right? He paused. Then we'll try again. But you will get it right, because you've done this 100 times. Remember what I always say? Fear is information. That's right, it tells you what matters. It doesn't get to be the captain, she finished quietly. He laughed softly, and even through the static I could hear pride breaking through fear. Okay, he said, time for a systems check. Flaps control? Located. Gear lever? Right side, red handle, labeled gear. Good. Altimeter set? 10,000 feet. Fuel? 7,800 pounds. Excellent. Every exchange between them sounded like a dance, precise, rehearsed, and heartbreakingly tender. Julia, Rob said, will begin descent to final approach altitude, 3,000 feet in about 15 minutes. Roger that. You are cleared to descend at pilot's discretion. He turned his voice back to Flora. Ready? Ready. Okay, baby. Reduce throttle just a hair, nose down gently. Watch for 1,000 on the VSI. Flora's breathing was loud in the headset. She did exactly as told. The plane dipped slightly, a subtle curve downward. Good, keep her there. You're descending through 9,000. Outside, the sunlight shifted to gold. Clouds stretched below us like oceans frozen mid-wave. I leaned toward the window. The earth had texture again, fields, lakes, veins of highway. The descent was flawless. Every adjustment Flora made seemed instinctive, like her hands already knew what the next correction would be. At 5,000 feet, I heard Rob inhale sharply. Flora, I can see you now. Her eyes widened. You can? I'm looking right at you through the tower binoculars. You're lined up perfectly. A tear slipped down her cheek. Don't leave me, okay? Not for a second. Carol, Rob's voice turned professional again. Prepare the cabin for final approach. Yes, Captain, I replied automatically. I picked up the intercom. Crew, prepare the cabin for landing. Secure everything. Brace positions on my command. Albert acknowledged, his voice cracking only slightly. Nena's calm echo followed. Cabin secure. Passengers tightened belts. Some held hands across aisles. Others whispered prayers. At the front of the plane, just outside the cockpit, I stopped and looked at the door. Beyond it, an 11-year-old was flying through wind and fear and expectation, and not once had she faltered. Inside, Rob's voice continued like a metronome of courage. Flora, you're at 3,000 feet. Flaps 15. Good. Bring your speed down to 200. Copy. Excellent. I want you to look out your window. Do you see the lights? Yes. That's the runway. That's home. Her hands were steady, her breathing even. The tears had dried on her cheeks. Say it again, Rob whispered. I'm flying the airplane, and you're bringing us home. Outside, Seattle waited under a veil of clouds and light. Inside, fear had turned into focus. As we leveled for final approach, I realized something. Courage doesn't roar. It whispers steady at 10,000 feet in a child's voice, repeating what her father taught her. The city lights of Seattle shimmered through scattered clouds like a constellation laid on its side. From this height, it looked peaceful. Nobody would have guessed that an 11-year-old girl was hand-flying a Boeing 737 straight toward it. Inside the cockpit, the air felt electric, too quiet, too heavy, too sacred to breathe in carelessly. Flora's eyes darted between instruments, her lips moving silently as she repeated every instruction her father gave. All right, sweetheart, Rob said through the headset, voice controlled but trembling underneath. You're on final approach for runway 16R. Longest one we've got, flaps 25. Flora's fingers found the flap lever, pushed it forward with precision that would have made any senior pilot proud. Flaps 25, she repeated. The aircraft trembled gently as the surfaces extended, the nose dipping slightly before she trimmed it back level. Good correction, Rob said. Now reduce speed, let's get her down to 170. The engines quieted. The hum of the jet turned low, like the sound of breathing before a prayer. I picked up the intercom, my voice steady out of sheer willpower. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your flight attendant. We are making our final descent into Seattle. Please remain seated, seatbelts fastened, and heads down when instructed. Everything is under control. That last line I'd never lied with more faith. Albert's voice came through the crew channel. Cabin secure. Passengers calm, mostly praying. Copy, I said. Prepare for brace command. When I looked back into the cockpit, Flora's jaw was clenched, her eyes wet but unblinking. Her small hands danced between throttle, yoke, and trim wheel like they'd memorized the music. Rob's voice again. You're doing amazing. Now flaps to 30. Flaps 30. Gear down. She reached for the red handle, pulled it down. The sound that followed was thunder in metal form, the hydraulic groan of the landing gear unfolding beneath us. The whole plane shuddered, then steadied. 3 green lights illuminated on the panel. 3 green, Flora said softly. Perfect, Rob replied, his voice cracked on that word. Through the windshield, I could see the runway lights, now long, bright veins leading straight to the heart of the city. It looked close enough to touch. Julia Gray, the air traffic controller, chimed in. Alaska 2127, you're clear to land runway, 16R. Wind calm, emergency crews in position. Flora's voice wavered but held. Roger, clear to land 16R. I felt the breath leave my lungs. It was really happening. Altitude 2,000 feet, Flora said. Good. Flaps full 40, Rob instructed. She eased the lever forward. The plane slowed further, the flaps extending to full span. Airspeed 150. On glide path, Flora reported. That's my pilot, Rob whispered. You're lined up beautifully. Just keep her steady. Let the runway come to you. I called out over the intercom. Brace positions in 90 seconds. Albert and Nena responded almost simultaneously. Copy. Then, Albert's calm voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your crew. We'll be landing shortly. When I say brace, lean forward, head down, hands over your neck, and remain that way until we stop. The cabin turned into a collective prayer. Heads bowed, lips moved without sound, mothers clutched their children. And at the very front, an 11-year-old carried all of us like a promise. Altitude 1,000 feet, Flora said. Her breathing was audible now, fast and uneven. Okay, sweetheart, Rob's voice softened. I see you, you're perfect. Just a little more power. Good, now start easing off. The runway was massive now, filling the windshield. My throat tightened. Carol, Rob said to me. Brace command now. I grabbed the intercom. Brace, brace, heads down, stay down. Behind me, I could hear the synchronized motion of 147 souls folding into fear and faith. 500 feet, Flora whispered. Keep her straight, Rob said. Little left rudder. Good. Hold your descent. Don't chase it. Let it come. Her small hands twitched once, then steadied. 200 feet. You're on center line. Eyes on the far end, not right in front. That's it. 100. Almost there, baby. Her voice was barely audible now. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. The wheels slammed into the runway with a force that made the whole fuselage rattle. For a heartbeat, I thought we'd bounced back into the air, but then came the second thud, solid and real. Rob shouted, brakes! Pull throttle to idle and push the pedals. Hard. Flora pushed with her tiny legs, gritting her teeth. I can't reach all the way. Try, baby, harder. The plane slowed, but not fast enough. The runway edges rushed closer through the windshield. That's when Tom Richardson, our failed volunteer pilot, lunged forward from the jump seat, slammed his shoes on top of hers, doubling the pressure. The brakes screamed. The plane shuddered violently. The smell of rubber filled the air. I grabbed the seat back, knuckles white. The runway edge flew toward us 500 feet, 300, 200. Then, silence. The engines whined down. The motion stopped. We weren't moving. For 3 long seconds, the cabin was dead silent. Then came a sound I'll never forget, 147 people exhaling at once, then clapping, then sobbing. Flora sat frozen, her hands still gripping the yoke, her chest heaving. I did it, she whispered. You did, I said, my voice breaking. You saved us. Albert's voice came through the intercom, hoarse with emotion. Carol, status? We're down, I said. We're safe. A pause, then a tremor in his voice. Thank God. Behind me, Nana's voice cracked over the cabin speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Seattle. The cabin erupted again, cheers, applause, people crying openly. I looked back once and saw strangers hugging each other, laughing through tears, disbelief turning into joy. Then the cockpit door swung open. Emergency responders poured in, paramedics, security, flight crew. They went straight for the captain and first officer, lifting them gently onto stretchers. Both were alive, though pale as ghosts. And then, through that sea of uniforms came a man in a dark pilot's uniform, eyes wild, face streaked with tears. "Flora!" he shouted. Flora spun around. "Daddy!" She ran to him, and he caught her mid-air, holding her so tight I could hear him sob. "You did it, baby. You really did it." "I was so scared," she whispered against his shoulder. "I know," he said, voice breaking, "but you didn't let the fear fly the plane." He kissed her forehead, over and over. "You're my hero." The passengers began filing out, shaky and red-eyed. Some stopped to hug Flora, others simply whispered thank you as they passed. Even the medics paused to nod at her. She just kept clutching her father, trembling now that the adrenaline was gone. Nena appeared at the cockpit door, tears streaking her cheeks. "That little girl," she said softly. "She saved all of us." And for once, even Albert, our unshakable rock, had tears in his eyes. An 11-year-old, the best damn pilot I've ever had. Outside the window, fire trucks stood still, their red lights flashing against the darkening sky. The emergency crews didn't need to move. They were just watching. Some of them clapped as Flora and her father stepped off the plane together. I unbuckled, followed them to the door, and as my feet touched the ground, I looked back. At the aircraft, its nose pointed slightly down, its engines cooling with a faint metallic sigh. We'd all walked away from a miracle. 6 months later, people still talked about Flight 2127 like it was a myth. But I remember every sound, every second, the trembling hum of the engines as we stopped, the silence that followed, the way the air itself seemed to ask, did we really make it? Yes, we did. Because of her. Flora Daniels, 11 years old, 4'10", brown ponytail, calm as a captain, became the youngest person in aviation history to land a commercial jet. But if you'd asked her, she'd say she was just doing what her dad taught her. The day after the landing, news cameras surrounded the terminal. Reporters shouted questions. Passengers wept on live television. The footage of that small girl stepping off the plane, holding her father's hand, aired across every continent. But when they called her a hero, she just shook her head. "I'm not a hero," she said into the microphones. "My dad is. He taught me how to fly." She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't pose. She just looked like a tired child who wanted to go home and maybe have pancakes. A month later, Alaska Airlines held a ceremony at their Seattle headquarters. Flora wore her school uniform because she didn't own a dress fancy enough for the occasion. The FAA administrator handed her a metal-polished silver with the engraved words, "For courage and composure in flight." When they asked her to speak, she gripped the podium, swallowed, and said, "I didn't think about fear. I thought about landing." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Her father, Captain Rob Daniels, stood behind her in full uniform, chest trembling as he held back tears. Later, when the cameras were gone, I overheard him whisper to her, "You taught me something that day. You taught me what fear is supposed to do." In the months that followed, Flora became a quiet celebrity. She was invited to talk shows, radio interviews, even documentaries, but she always gave short answers. When people asked how she stayed calm, she'd reply, "Because someone had to." And when they asked if she was afraid, she'd say, "Yes, but I didn't let it fly the plane." The world eventually moved on, as it always does. The headlines faded, the hashtags disappeared, and news stories took their place. But for the 147 people on that flight, life split into two parts, before Flora and after Flora. For me, every takeoff since then feels different. The air smells the same, stale coffee and engine oil, but there's a new awareness beneath the routine. Every safety briefing feels more sacred. Every checklist feels like gratitude written in procedure form. And every time I walk past seat 14C, I remember the moment that courage outgrew age. 6 months later, I saw her again. It was another Boston to Seattle run, same route, same aircraft model. I spotted her the moment she stepped through the boarding door. Ponytail, backpack, same quiet confidence. She smiled when she saw me. "Hi, Miss Carol." "Flora, look at you traveling alone again?" She nodded. "Visiting Grandma and Grandpa. They still won't stop telling the story." I laughed. "Neither will anyone else." She slid into 14C like she was born for it. "How's school?" I asked. "Good. I joined the robotics club in advanced math." Still flying with your dad? Every weekend, she said proudly. We're certified on the 737 MAX simulator now. I raised an eyebrow. Already upgrading your fleet? She grinned. You never know. When the doors closed and we pushed back, I took my jump seat. The new captain's voice came through the intercom, smooth and practiced. Good afternoon, folks. This is Captain James Wright. Welcome aboard Alaska Airlines Flight 2127. I froze. Captain Wright, the same man whose pulse had gone faint under Dr. Fitz's trembling fingers that day. Alive, recovered, flying again. He continued, We've got clear skies all the way to Seattle, and before we take off, I want to introduce a very special passenger seated in 14C, Miss Flora Daniels. 6 months ago, this young lady safely landed a 737 when both pilots were incapacitated. She saved 147 lives, including mine. The cabin exploded in applause. Flora covered her face, blushing deep red, but when she peeked through her fingers, her smile was brighter than any cockpit light I'd ever seen. Captain Wright added, voice trembling with pride, So, Flora, from all of us, thank you for bringing us home. Applause turned to cheers. Some passengers stood, others wiped tears. And there I was, sitting up front again, feeling my chest tighten the same way it did that day, but for a different reason this time. Not fear, awe. Hours later, as we began our descent, I walked back to her row. She looked up, calm as ever. Hi again. I smiled. Captain Wright wants to know if you'd like to do the arrival announcement. Her eyes widened. Me? Really? Really? She hesitated, then nodded. I handed her the PA mic and the cue card with arrival details. When she spoke, the cabin fell silent. Good afternoon, everyone, she began softly. This is Flora Daniels. On behalf of Captain Wright and the entire crew, we'd like to welcome you to Seattle. The local time is 1:47 p.m., and the temperature is 62 degrees with partly cloudy skies. For those of you visiting, welcome to the Emerald City. For those coming home, she paused, looked out the window as sunlight struck the clouds, and smiled. Welcome home. We're so glad you made it safely. The cabin erupted once more, clapping, laughter, even a few joyful sobs. Flora blushed, handed me back the mic, and said, I think I like this part best. Which one? I asked. The landing, she said. It's when everyone stops being scared. After passengers disembarked, I walked her to the gate. Her father was waiting, same uniform, same proud smile, same arms open wide. She ran into them, and I watched the two of them disappear into the crowd, sunlight glinting off the metal around her neck. I stood there a while longer, watching the plane she'd once saved glisten under the terminal lights. Flying used to mean schedules, service, routine. Now it means something else, something that can't be written in manuals. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear take the controls. And heroes? Sometimes they're not old enough to drive. Sometimes they sit in 14C, feet barely touching the pedals, landing a jet full of people because no one else could. Every time I see a child board alone now, I smile a little wider, kneel a little lower, and whisper the same thing. If you ever get scared up there, remember fear is information, but it's not the captain. Then I stand, straighten my uniform, and close the cabin door. Because somewhere out there, under the clouds, courage still flies. End of part 5. Welcome home.